So we're going to go through a couple examples of the quadratic formula. So remember, our quadratic formula says that x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So the first example we're going to do is we're going to solve one that doesn't already equal 0. So we're going to solve the equation 4x squared minus 5x equals negative x plus 63. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to move everything from the right side to the left side. So I'm going to make it equal to 0. So I'm going to add x. Right, you're going to make sure you line up your like terms so it cancels out over here. And then I'm going to subtract 63, and there is no like term, so I'm just going to stick it on the end by itself. So now I have the equation 4x squared minus 4x, right, because we have negative 5 plus 1, and then minus 63 is equal to 0. So I have that my a value is 4, my b value is negative 4, and my c value is negative 63. So I'm going to find my discriminant first. We'll use purple for that. So my discriminant is equal to b squared minus 4ac, right, the stuff under the square root. So I'm going to get negative 4 all squared minus 4 times 4 times negative 63. Now I'm just going to go ahead and use a calculator for this. So I'm going to use the Desmos Scientific Calculator, which if you Google Desmos Scientific Calculator, it will come up. And I'm going to make sure I type that the same way that I had it on my paper. And I like this calculator because as you continue typing, it pops up with the answer on the end. So my answer, my discriminant, is 1024. So now I'm going to go ahead and set up my quadratic formula. So I have x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of my discriminant all over 2 times a. So I'm going to go ahead and just put my 1024 in for the discriminant. My b value was negative 4 and my a value is positive 4. So plugging in all of my numbers. And then I'm going to just simplify. So I get negative of negative 4 is positive 4 plus or minus the square root of, just clear everything. The square root of 1024 is equal to 32. So plus or minus 32 all over 8. And then I'm going to go ahead and split this up. So my first answer is going to be x equals 4 plus 32 all over 8. And my second answer will come from 4 minus 32 all over 8. So then all I have to do is simplify. So I have x equals 36 over 8, and both of those numbers are reducible by 4. So my final answer over here is going to be that x equals 9 halves. And then over here, I'm going to get that x can equal negative 28 over 8. And again, they're both divisible by 4. So I'm going to get that x is equal to negative 7 over 2. So those are my two answers. So I want you to go ahead and pause the video. I want you to go to Delta Math. And complete the rational section. And then come back to the video. So our next example is going to be of something called irrational solutions. So irrational solutions just means, right, these are not whole numbers or fractions. There's going to be square roots involved. So we're going to solve 12x squared plus 3x minus 7 equals negative 4. So the first thing I need to do is make it equal to 0. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Combining it with my like term of negative 7. So now I'm going to be solving 12x squared plus 3x minus 3 is equal to 0. Now, one solving technique that we haven't talked about yet is pulling out a GCF. So you can do this if it's all equal to 0. So I have a GCF of 3 here, right? Everything is equal to 3. So I'm going to divide every single part by 3, including the 0. So now my numbers are a little smaller. So I'm going to get 4x squared plus 1x minus 1 is equal to 0. And now I can go ahead and pull out my coefficients. So a is 4, b is equal to 1, and then c is the negative 1 there on the end. So again, I'm going to start with my discriminant first. So my discriminant is b squared minus 4 times a times c. So setting that up, I get 1 squared minus 4 times 4 times negative 1. And we could do this one by hand because the numbers aren't that big. So 1 squared is 1, 4 times 4 is 16, and then I have 2 negatives, so it's going to end up being positive 16, so I'm going to get 17 as my discriminant. And so right off the bat, so like because our discriminant is positive, I know there's 2 real solutions, so there's no imaginary numbers, but we didn't really talk about this in class. 17 is not a perfect square, so when your discriminant is not a perfect square, you know you're going to have irrational solutions because you can't take the square root of it. So then we're going to go to our quadratic formula. So x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant all over 2 times a. So we get opposite of 1 plus or minus the square root of 17 all over 2 times 4. So that's going to be negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 17 all over 8. And that's going to be our final answer. Now, one thing that you need to check, so we're going to write this out. Always check that you cannot break down the square root. Right, so that means that you can't pull out any perfect squares. And we're going to leave the negative 1 plus or minus square root of 17 all over 8 as our final answer because we can't do anything with that, right? We could write it as 2 separate fractions, negative 1 plus the square root of 17 all over 8 and negative 1 minus the square root of 17 all over 8. But that's as far as we can go because we can't actually combine the numbers in the top, so we're not even going to worry about it. Okay. So go ahead and pause the video and go try some sample problems. Okay, so we are going to try one more problem together, and that is going to be with imaginary solutions. So this means that there are going to be i's in our answers. So to do that, we are actually not going to look at this problem. I decided I didn't like this problem after I set it up, so we're going to solve a new problem. So we're going to solve 4x squared plus 10x equals negative 11. So what we're going to do is, of course, make it equal to 0. So we're going to add 11 to both sides. Now there's no like term, so I'm just going to stick it on the end. So I have 4x squared plus 10x plus 11 equals 0. So there's no GCF, so I can't reduce anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and start identifying my coefficients. So a is 4, b is 10, and c is equal to 11. And I'm going to use those to find my discriminant first. All right, so b squared minus 4ac. So b squared is going to be 10 squared, 4 times 4 times 11. And I'm feeling lazy, so let's type that in the calculator. So 10 squared in parentheses minus 4 times, I want to say it was 4 times 11. And we get that it is negative 76. Right, so a negative discriminant tells us, right, we'll just review the discriminant a little bit. This tells us we have no real roots, right? There's no x-intercepts. and that means that there are two imaginary solutions to this problem. So we're going to have two i's. So now let's go ahead and set up our quadratic formula. So we're going to get that x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant all over 2 times a. And then we're going to plug in our numbers. Okay, so the opposite of 10 is negative 10 plus or minus. I'm going to break off the negative 1. And then 2 times 4 is 8. I apologize for my dogs. Okay, so moving on to another line, space this out, we get negative 10 plus or minus I times the square root of 76 all over 8. And that I, right, is just coming from replacing the square root of negative 1. So now what we need to do is we need to see if we can break this down. So 76, I can rewrite. Right, I think 4 goes into this number. We're going to check with our calculator. So we've got 76 divided by 4. That's 19. So I can rewrite this as the square root of 4 times the square root of 19. And that's just going to become 2 times the square root of 19. So I'm going to take this whole thing and put it in place of my square root of 76. So now I'm going to get that. This is still x equals negative 10 plus or minus 2i square root of 19 all over 8. Just rearranging the 2i in the square root of 19, putting it in the proper order. Now, this is a fraction answer. So just like other fraction problems, right, whenever you have a fraction, you always want to leave it in lowest terms. So you're going to look at all 3 of the whole numbers on the outside, just the outside numbers, and see if they have a common factor. So all of these numbers are divisible by 2. So we're going to divide the top and the bottom by 2. Again, just the outside numbers. So we're going to get that x is equal to negative 5 plus or minus 1i, or just I, square root of 19 all over 4. And that's going to be our final answer.